Well, following that, we have the slasher Sweet 16 from 1983. Being a slasher, the plot's not something that's overly complex. A family moves into a town. Teenage girl tries to make some friends. Many of the people she meets end up dying, and she becomes a suspect by the town's sheriff. And the sheriff is a daughter who's also trying to investigate these murders. She's sort of like the amateur detective type. And there's sort of a mystery unfolding throughout the movie of who is doing these killings. Like I said, some people are suspecting the new girl named Melissa. Others are suspecting some Native Americans who live in the town. And there's decent amount of mystery in this movie. And that's probably the one pretty positive thing about it. Sweet 16 is a movie that's decent, but there were so many slashes from the early 80s, and with so many movies trying to compete, in my opinion, it's somewhat hard for a slasher to really stand out unless they really have a kick to it. Sweet 16, in my opinion, didn't really have that kick. It's still enjoyable. I'm a big slasher fan, but did it have everything I was hoping for? Honestly, many of the kills were somewhat repetitive, and while I did like the mystery, I was hoping for a little more. I believe the Chucky of a slightly different take.
Well, yeah, it's certainly a movie that you don't watch for special kills. I mean, everything is just, kind of like a first-person close-up stabbing motion for at least the few kills in the movie that I can recall off the top of my head. I think on the surface, it's a very simple plot, and then we get towards the end, and we actually kind of find out more about what's going on, and that part I really enjoyed. I can't really... I don't want to go into too much detail about it, just in case there's anyone out there who actually wants to watch a movie, and I don't want to spoil anything. I don't know if this is a thing for me or not, but I can maybe bring up one or two examples. But if there's movies out there that deal with people who have been thrown mentally unbalanced due to abuse... There's another movie I watched, I think it's called Up Against Amanda, which is a bad movie overall, but the ending of the movie had a similar sort of thing to this one. Not a similar scene, but a similar kind of theme as to why things happened. And both of those really stuck out to me. And another thing about this movie is that, and I've brought this up in previous episodes, where anytime the location of the movie reminds me of where I grew up. And this one very much does. It reminds me of the small town that I grew up in. It's not exactly a very green area. Where was this film? Texas? It looks like it's in some...
Yeah, I believe it's Los Angeles, California.
Okay.
Which is probably a much different place in the 80s than it is nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently so. Because I definitely thought this looked like Texas also.
Yeah, but it's all those rural type locations. You could walk a mile and be away from the next person's house. That type of thing. Anytime I watch movies like that really helps me relate more to what's happening in the movie, I guess.
I think my main question about the movie is whether or not the theme song of Melissa's is a bit over the top, or is it just the right type of emotional thing you're looking for? Because I'll be honest, it was like a 50-50 type thing for me. Like, the first time might have been okay, but then it came back again, and
Well, I mean, I must admit, I actually listened to that song a lot. Like, the soundtrack's on Spotify, so which is kind of weird for a early 80s obscure slasher movie to have a soundtrack on Spotify.
That's somewhat impressive, actually.
And it's actually got two versions of it. It's got the actual song version, then like an instrumental version, where it's basically the music, but with extra guitar played on top of it in place of the actual vocals. But that song... If the movie didn't have that song, I probably would drop my rating down a point, as silly as that seems. I don't know, there's something about that song being played, especially at the end with those freeze-frame type endings. I don't know, I'm a bit of a sucker for freeze-frame type endings like that.
I'll say the ending actually reminded me a little of Prom Night, which we discussed. I believe that was the first show, because it's sort of a downbeat ending, which isn't really spoiling much. Many slashes have downbeat endings, and there's a song playing. It's just it's a moment that might stick with you after you finish the movie.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually had the same thought on that too. Like, I was going to use Prom Night as the exact same example, and you can probably tell from the ratings that I put on the website that I rate them very similarly.
As you already mentioned, I actually think most of the main cast for this movie is pretty solid. As Pastor props go to Bo Hopkins, who plays the main sheriff, and he has a, in my opinion, very southern feel to him, and he definitely feels like the exact type of guy that would be a sheriff in a small town like this.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed his role in the movie as well.
Yeah, so certainly probably, in my opinion, one of the more realistic ones. I especially like the interplay between him and his children. There's no way in modern day America a cop would bring his children to a crime scene, but or to go interrogate a suspect. But it shows really the size, really small size of this town, which, I've never lived in a town quite this small. I just really like that really sort of secluded atmosphere.
And there are a few people in the movie who have some, they are in a few other well-known movies, like Dana Kimmel. She was in Friday the 13th Part 3, I think.
Yeah.
Don Shanks, he was the main suspect in this movie. He played Michael Myers in Halloween 5.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't know that until I was looking through his IMDb credits, but I thought it was pretty interesting.
Susan Strasberg, the mother in this movie, she's been in some other horror movies. I think there was The Manitou, which comes to mind. But yeah, they've definitely, got some other movies out there in the genre that I'm sure people are familiar with. So it does have a fairly decent cast in it.
Yeah, I just wish... my thing is, I just wish more of the chaos in the movie were just a bit more memorable. Because when you think of slasher movies, really, at least in my opinion, and I am happy if people disagree with me, of utmost importance is memorable death scenes. And if you don't really have that, I'm not sure how much some of the other things in the movie can make up for it.
They're not aesthetically pleasing, but there is a certain relentlessness to them.
Yeah, there was some good brutality to a few of them.
Yeah, that's probably a better word. They're kind of more brutal stabbings. Just stab away, and just keep stabbing.
I think another thing that works somewhat against this movie, a birthday-themed slasher was done. This is the Happy Birthday to Me came out in 1981, and generally speaking, that's in my opinion, much more memorable and more enjoyable slasher. So then, I'm not sure if Sweet 16 was trying to sort of play off the Happy Birthday to Me, but I mean, I don't know, I like the mystery, but I'm not sure how much more this one, aside from a solid cast, how much more it had going for it.
I have a feeling that they probably weren't really trying to replicate anything from Happy Birthday to Me.
Yeah, I suspect most slashers in the early 80s worked pretty much independently of each other.
Because, I mean, in this movie, it's really only towards the end she has a birthday party, and even the majority of that ending, they're away from the party, and it doesn't even feel like there's much of a birthday in the movie outside of the 2-minute scene in the movie.
Out of interest, do you have any opinions one way or the other of those two overly intoxicated guys who went into engage in relations with the now 16-year-old girl?
Yeah.
Let me talk about some somewhat despicable individuals.
Yeah, they're in the opening to the movie,
yes.
And they get off to a pretty bad start right away. So I guess, you can look at this and say, just looking at these people, there's no way this person's only just turning 16.
I'm assuming the actress was, well, I mean, she had a nude scene, so I'm definitely assuming she was over 16 by that point.
I mean, they all kind of look, 19, 20 at least. So, trying to pass off as 16, bit of a stretch. But we're used to that. We see it all the time in horror movies.
It's part of the charm.
Yeah, we don't make a big deal out of that.
That might be why it's so difficult for me to tell people's ages now, because I'm just so used to horror movies. Oh, this guy's 15. He's playing with some 25-year-old guy.
Yeah.
So, what would your overall feelings on this one be, Chucky?
Well, just overall, I really enjoy the setting of the movie. The kills are fairly brutal, but very quick, and there's not a whole lot to look at from a slasher or a pure slasher aspect. It's more the mystery of who is it, what happens at the end, and of course the cheesy 80s theme song for the music. All of that combined just I don't know, it plays into that 80s nostalgic feel that I guess I have in particular for its time period. I give the movie an 8 out of 10. I can definitely see how other people would watch this and be like, there's nothing much at all to like about the movie, but I don't know, it's just a few of these small details that don't particularly resonate with other people that do with me, and that's just what helps throw it into being an enjoyable movie.
I think in many ways, Sweet 16 is somewhat generic, but at the same time, you could probably fairly say that about many of the slashes from the early to mid 80s. I do think the kills are probably the biggest issue with the movie, but there's some pretty good mystery here. And like we alluded to, there's a pretty solid cast here also. I enjoy how they threw in some sort of a look at racism when they dealt with the Native American characters, which is, I thought a little unique. I'm not sure what led them to do that, but I sort of enjoyed them throwing that in there to give the movie just a little more depth. I also really enjoyed Dana Kimmel. I thought she had a fantastic performance, and along with Paul Hopkins is probably the standout. Though I think Sweet 16 isn't nearly as good as many other slashers, since I am a giant fan of slasher movies, I'd still give this one an above average rating at 7.5, but it's certainly nothing that would make my top 20, maybe even not even my top 50 slasher movies of the 80s. It's still a decent movie. If you just want a movie you throw in and watch, spend some time with. I mean, you could definitely do much worse, but it's probably not one that I would go back to all that many times.